Hilchos Mechusrei Kaparah Perek Rabbi, the laws of sacrifices for those lacking atonement, chapter 4. Today we're moving on to the fourth and final of the people that are called Mechusrei Kaparah. We talked about the Zava, the woman who has an irregular blood flow, the Yeledes, the birthing woman, the Zav, the last 2 days, the man with the irregular discharge. And now we go to the last one, that's the Mitzayra, a person who has tsaras lesions. And here you get to see one of the examples of the Rambam's extreme organization and compartmentalization when making his book. You see, the person with the Mitzayra, the person with tsaras, has two elements to the laws pertaining to him. One is the element of ritual impurity. When you get tsaras, if it's a valid or qualifying lesion, the person literally becomes ritually impure to a degree. All the laws pertaining to that, as well as the beginning of the purification process, the part that makes him pure from the impurity, are going to be discussed in the next book, in a separate section of laws called Tumas Tsaras, the impurity of the lesions. This book, which talks about sacrifices, takes just the tail end of the process of the Mitzayra's purification, just the sacrifice part, the part that brings him from lacking atonement to full atonement. So even though the Rambam is going to mention in very short the purification process, it's going to be much more explored at length in the next book. Here, we're exclusively dealing with the laws as they relate to sacrifices. And so the Rambam begins as follows. Halacha Aleph. When a person who gets tsaras is healed from his lesions, upon the inspection of a Kohen, there's a whole way how to do that. After we put him through the beginning of the purification process, which is done in a very special way, using cedar wood and hyssop and a red string and two birds, it's a whole ceremony Torah describes at length. You have a bowl of water and you slaughter a bird over the water so the blood mixes with the water, then you dip the wood and the hyssop and the string inside the water, you sprinkle it on the Mitzayra. This is the purification process. That is done, by the way, outside of Jerusalem, because part of the Mitzayra's consequence is that he must be outside of the camp. He cannot be in the city. So after we do this purification process, and in addition, we shave his entire body, everything, not just the head, and we put him in the mikvah. So after these three things are done, and again, they're done outside of the city, after all of this, he's allowed back into Jerusalem. And I'm just going to borrow this slide from yesterday, even though it's not about the Mitzayra, it's more about the Zav, but it's the same principle. Umayna shivas yamim, he counts a week. There's no inspections or examinations of cleanliness like the Zav, just simply you wait for the time to elapse. He counts 7 days, ubayem ashvi, and on the seventh day, megaleach tiglachto shniya kitiglachas orishayna. He has to shave again. Second time like the first time. Whatever grew in those 7 days needs to be shaved off again. This is all clear in the Torah, all these things. V'toivel, and he goes to the mikvah. On day 7, he goes to the mikvah. V'harehu tvul yom. That makes him into a tvul yom. Tvul yom, again, is a person who is on his way out of ritual impurity. He already went to the mikvah, but he's waiting for the day to be over. So at this point, after mikvah on day 7, he's a tvul yom. Umariv shimshai. Then he waits for the sun to set for nightfall. Ulemachar bashmini, and the next day, on the 8th day, toivel pam shniya, he goes to the mikvah a second time. Ta'achar kach makrivin karbonesav, and then we bring his sacrifice, which is going to be detailed in the rest of this chapter. Omipnei Ma asks the Rambam, why? Toivel bashmini, achar shetoivel me'emesh. Why does he go to the mikvah again a second time on the 8th day? He already went to the mikvah yesterday. What's the point of this additional mikvah? Says the Rambam, this is a rabbinic decree, mipnei shahaya ragil betuma b'mei chilutai, because he was accustomed to impurity in the days of his chilutai. This is a tsaras term. We're going to explore it later, again in the laws of tsaras. But basically, when a person got a lesion and he was only worried that it might be tsaras, he wasn't sure, he'd go to the Kohen. If the Kohen felt that it needed more time, he would put him into quarantine. That's called hesger, closing up. Locked up for a week. After a week, he would inspect it. At that point, the Kohen might decide hechlet, totality. He's decided to be absolutely impure. And once the Mitzayra enters the days of chilut or hechlet, that's when he has to be sent out of the camp. So the Rambam is saying during these days of chilut, during the days that he was definitely considered a Mitzayra, he was accustomed to becoming impure. He didn't care to touch impure things. He's already impure. Therefore, he's not used to being careful from impurity. You can imagine us today. Today it's so far off from our reality, we don't even deal with ritual impurity. But even in those days when everybody was aware of it, once you're a Mitzayra and for a while you're outside the camp, you already forget how to be careful with tumah. Therefore, we're worried that after day 7, even though he already went to the mikvah, maybe he became impure again, and we don't want to bring him into the temple courtyard in a state of impurity. Lefichach, therefore, when he comes the 8th day, Toivel Bashmini, he goes to the mikveh again on the 8th day, Be'ezras Hanashim, in the women's courtyard. The women's courtyard, of course, is this area. It's not yet considered to be the holy temple structure where some impure people cannot come in. So he was allowed in here, the Mitzayra. And he would go to the mikveh, Belishkas HaMitzayraim Shasham, in the special chamber for the Mitzayras, right over here. The northwestern corner was the Lishkas HaMitzayraim, there was a mikveh there, and he would use that mikveh. Even though he never diverted his mind. Maybe he was fully attentive all 24 hours since yesterday's mikveh. We say it doesn't make a difference. Every Mitzayra has to go through the second immersion on the 8th day. Halacha Beis. This is the ideal way, 7th and 8th day. Misacher v'loy gilach bashvi. Let's say he was delayed. He didn't do the second shaving on the 7th day. V'gilach bashmini achar kama yomim. Instead, he does the shaving on the 8th day or after a couple of days. You still have to wait. The day that he wants to shave, he needs to go to the mikveh and wait till sunset. And only the next day will he bring his sacrifices, again after a second immersion, as we explained. And now the Rambam goes through the entire procedure of the sacrifice. How do we do the sacrificial procedure for the Mitzayra? So using this, here's the temple courtyard. This is called the Azara. In this temple courtyard itself, it's divided into two parts. This little thin strip is called the Ezras Yisrael, the Israelite courtyard. The rest of it is called the Ezras Kohanim, the Kohen's courtyard. So the Mitzayra had to be outside. Since he's not fully pure, he can't yet enter the temple courtyard. So he stands outside, even the Israelite Azara, Keneged Pesach Mizrachis, right opposite the eastern entrance, which is here, Be'iskupas Shar Nikanor, on the threshold of the Nikanor gates. The gates over here were the Nikanor gates, donated by a man named Nikanor, famous story. He brought them from Egypt, and there was a storm on the way. They threw one door overboard, and it floated with them, a whole miraculous thing. So he stands over here, Upanav Lamairav, facing west, meaning facing inwards into the temple area. But he's not in there yet, he's still standing in the space of the doorway. And truth is, this was a place that was used for many people. All people lacking atonement would stand over there when they would purify them. For example, I showed you 2 days ago the woman who gives birth. You can see here, she's standing, there it is, she's standing in the doorway of these two big gates, that's Nikanor gates, and that's where she would bring her sacrifice. So all Mechusrei Kaparah would stand in this place. V'sham mashkenas hasoites, that was also where they gave the sota to drink. Remember, all the way in the 4th book, the woman is under suspected adultery. She has to drink some bitter waters to determine, there was a test, to determine if she committed adultery or not. It would happen right there in this gateway. Anyway, back to the Mitzayra. Here we'll use this picture again, even though it's not fully accurate because it shows with the hyssop part. We're leaving that out. The Mitzayra is here in the gateway of the Azara. And then it goes like this. The Kohen would take the Mitzayra's guilt offering. There was a sheep that he brought for a guilt offering while it was still alive. And he would wave it together with a little amount of oil. A leg is about 12 ounces, 12, 13 ounces of oil that was going to be used in the process in the east. Kederech kol hatnufos, like any other waving. So again, we'll use this picture here, the aerial view. The kohen, this is in the east side of the mizbeach. The kohen is doing the waving over here. He's holding a sheep with a bit of oil, and he's waving it like you do any sacrifice, forward and backwards, upwards and downwards. If they waved both on their own, it's also fine. Ideally, you do it together, but if not, it's fine. Then he walks the animal all the way to the gateway over here, where the Mitzayra is standing. Because we know that before you bring a sacrifice, the owner has to do smicha, has to lean his hands on it. But this Mitzayra can't come in, because he's still impure. So you would walk the animal all the way till this gateway, and the Mitzayra was allowed to put his hands in. As long as you don't go in with most of your body, you can stick your hands in past the doorway, do smicha on it, lean on it, and they would slaughter it right away. Now obviously right away doesn't mean exactly right away, because the ashram is a holy of holy sacrifice, has to be slaughtered in the northern area of the temple courtyard. So they had to walk it a little bit to the north, and then they could slaughter it. But the point is, you do it as soon as possible, no delays. Usually one Kohen would receive the blood of any sacrifice. Here, 2 Kohanim had to be at the ready, and that's because the Torah alludes to 2 Kohanim with the Mitzayra. 2 Kohanim received the blood. Echad mekabel bikli, v'zorke al gabi hamizbeach. One is the sacrificial blood. he accepts the blood in a utensil and throws it onto the altar. The echad biyadei hayemanis. One of them catches some blood, not with a cup, with his hand, with his right hand. Uma'ara liyadei hasmalis. Then he takes, it's a very detailed description here. He takes the blood from his right hand, pours it into his left hand, and he's going to use his left hand as the utensil for this following process. Umaze be'etzboi hayemanis. He will sprinkle on the mitzvah using his right finger. So again, he's caught the blood with his right hand, because every service must be done with the right hand, pours to the left hand, and he's going to use his finger like this, dipping in, to sprinkle on the mitzvah. V'imshina v'kibel b'smay tchila pasal. So much so that if the kohen changed and received the blood with the left hand, it's disqualified. Now what happens? HaKohen shekibel mixas hadam b'kli. The first kohen who received some of the blood in the utensil, moilichai v'zerkel mizbeach tchila. He first finishes the sacrificial part. You go to the mizbeach, sprinkle it on the mizbeach. And then the Kohen who received the blood in his hand walks over to the Mitzayra. The Kohen is still inside, in the holy area, while the Mitzayra is still outside. The Mitzayra puts his head in. Because again, as long as you don't come in with most of your body, you're fine. So he dips his head into the area that's actually holy. And the Kohen applies some of the blood in his hand to the middle ridge of the right ear. Now tomorrow we'll see more details on this, but I'll just show you over here. It's called today the antihelix. Right over here, you have this is called the helix, the outer bone, and then you have this little ridge that comes upwards, that's called the antihelix.
How did you get
so you apply it right over there. Huh?
Is this also from the Torah?
All in the Torah.
Yeah.
It's all clear in the Torah. Look over here.
Yeah, it says somewhere.
I can show you over here. Look.
Yeah.
These are the actual verses. V'lakacha kohen midam ha'asham, v'natan kohen al tunuch ozen al mitahir ha'yimanit.
So he paints it on, or he flicks it in?
So this one, it seems like he applies it. No flicking. You just apply it to the right middle ridge, and then v'achar kach yachnis yadei ha'yimanis. Then the Mitzayra takes out his head and now puts in his right hand, v'yiten al bayhin yadei. And the Kohen applies it to his big finger, which is the thumb, right hand. So as we're going to see tomorrow, it's on the outside of the right thumb. Some hold it's over here, down here. Others say it's over here. But the point is, no. So the Mitzayra will put in the thumb like this, and the Kohen will take his right hand, dip it into the blood, and apply it to the Mitzayra's right thumb. Then the Mitzayra will take out his right hand, put in his right foot, and the Kohen will apply the blood to the big toe on the right foot. Also, same thing. If you can imagine your big toe, kind of like over here on the joint. Remember, when you came into the temple courtyard, you were barefoot. There was no shoes. You had to, every Jew, even not Kohen, you had to walk. So head, right thumb, and right big toe. Again, you put it on the left one, you haven't fulfilled the obligation. It has to be the right side. And later on, afterwards, once this procedure is done, he can bring also the sin offering and the burnt offering, which are either 2 birds or 2 animals, depending on the Mitzayra's affordability, financial means. Now, we mentioned before, there was a little bit of oil. That's also part of the process. After the Kohen applies the blood that's in his hand to the big toe and the big finger, noitel hakoyen, mileg hashemen, the kohen takes a little bit from the oil, v'yotzek l'seich kapay shel chaveirei hasmalis, and he pours it into another kohen, left hand. If you look over here, it says v'lokach hakoyen mileg hashemen, v'yotzak al kaf hakoyen hasmalis. The kohen takes from the oil and he pours it onto the kohen's left hand. Why use the word kohen twice? So from here we learn there was a separate kohen. The kohen who was doing the blood takes the oil and puts it into another Kohen's left hand. However, if you put it into your own hand, it's fine. Why? Because in the next verse it says, "V'taval hakohen," the Kohen dips his right finger from the oil asher al kapoy hasmalis in his left hand. So there's an implication, right? So that's why ideally you're supposed to put it into the other Kohen's hand. Put it into your hand, it's fine because the Torah does mention kapoy, that it could be the Kohen's own hand. Either way, whether you're doing the mitzvah in its ideal way, it's in someone else's hand or it's in your hand, He dips his right finger into the oil in his hand. Umaza sheva pa'amim keneged beis kodesh HaKodashim. First thing you do is you sprinkle 7 times towards the Holy of Holies. They're standing over here, right? But the Holy of Holies is down here. So the Kohen sprinkles basically westward, just in the air, 7 times. Al kol hazoya tfilas etzba b'shemen. Every time he would dip his finger again, like with the high priest on Yom Kippur. You don't just dip it in and do a bunch of times. You dip it once, you sprinkle. You dip it once, you sprinkle. 7 times. And the imhizav aleikivin keneged beis kodesh HaKodashim ksheres. If you sprinkled it without directing it exactly that way, it's also fine. But the point is 7 sprinklings with oil. Then he comes to the Mitzayra with the oil. V'yitein min hashemen al mekoim dam ha'asham. The Rambam is borrowing the actual language of the verse. It says here, leftover oil, the Kohen will place al dam ha'asham, over the blood. So the same place where the blood was applied, you put it on. You put the oil as well. Again, on the middle ridge of the ear, the antihelix, the thumb, and the big toe. Whatever remains from the oil in his hand, he rubs it into the head of the Mitzayra. The Mitzayra is bald, remember, right? Because he had to shave everything. So he puts it onto the head of the Mitzayra. Again, if you didn't do that, you haven't achieved atonement. Whatever remains in the cup, the utensil of the oil, that goes to the Kohanim. And the Rambam says it's literally treated like a sacrifice. The remainder of the log of oil is only eaten in the temple courtyard, where the Kohanim would eat their sacrificial meat, to male Kohanim, like any other holy of holy sacrifice, because in the Torah it's juxtaposed, it's compared to the actual guilt offering. And it's forbidden for the Kohanim to eat from this oil until they do the sprinkling of the 7 times and the applications on the big thumb and the big toe and the ear. If the Kohen would eat from the oil before, you get lashes. Literally like eating sacrificial meat before the blood is sprinkled, it's forbidden. Eating the oil before the oil is sprinkled is also totally forbidden. Instead you have to wait, and then you eat it with all the other good stuff, like Kohanim eat all sacrifices.
So in